hands and knees. We'll begin in table. So on your inhale, drop your belly down, pull your chest forward. And on your exhale, round up towards the sky. Scoop your belly in, squeeze your thighs together a little bit, and push the floor away. Inhale, belly down, chest forward. And exhale, scoop and round. As you round, try to keep your weight even in your arms and in your knees. Inhale, belly down, chest forward. And exhale, round it up. Curl all 10 of your toes under, getting your pinky toes pointed forward. Go ahead and sit back onto your heels. You're going to push into your hands a little bit here. If you have any discomfort in your knee because of the pressure or flexion, you might be able to relieve that by giving yourself a little bit of a block under your hips, but still get this big stretch across the soles of your feet. So the reasons your heels don't come down to the floor in downward facing dog, it could be muscular or musculotendinous. It could be the joints themselves of your ankle. It could be a tendency to hyperextend at your knees, which will then shorten the muscle called soleus in your calf. Or it could be general myofascial restrictions. And if you look at the back of the body, really, you can use your hands to get your toes to point forward and get your pinky toes as much on the floor as is reasonable, depending on the shape of your foot. So when you get yourself really settled, most everybody's going to feel a little bit of a stretch on the soles of the feet. And that is continuous. Those fibers of the feet, the plantar fascia, is continuous with the fibers at the back of the leg. So if you're using a block on your knee, or another alternative would be to have your blanket between the thigh and the calf for protection of the knee. Come back into table pose, but keep your toes curled under. And drop your belly down so you get your tail up towards the sky. Press through the base of the first finger, and then rise up into a weird short table, downward facing dog pose. Yeah. So your block can be gone, and you're just getting this nice stretch through the heels here. Now, what I want you to look for in this knee bent downward facing dog is that your heels are pointing back and your toes are pointing forward, and that your knees are still bent, so you feel a nice stretch along the calf muscle called soleus, which doesn't cross your knee. Okay, go ahead and straighten your knee and walk your hands all the way back towards the back of the yoga mat. Hands to the back of the yoga mat. Grab hold of your elbows, shake out your head, and rock a little side to side. This is our Uttanasana, but this will also help to open up the backs of the legs. Keep a little bend here so that there's a nice release in your spine. Don't let your head be heavy, shake it out, nod it up and down, and really just sway side to side so you feel the muscular opening at the backs of the legs. Walk your hands right back out to downward facing dog, and just pause before your heels come off the floor. So even if it's a short downward facing dog, pause before your heels come off the floor. So downward facing dog, belly is high, heels are up, arms are stretched out in front of you. Rise to your tiptoes. That's going to contract your calves a lot. So rise to your tiptoes, get your heels as high as you can get them off the floor, and then bend or sink your heels down. And rise to your tiptoes and sink your heels down. Rise to your tiptoes and sink your heels down. This is contract, relax. As we contract, we rise to the tiptoes. The muscles that cross the feet into the Achilles tendon have to contract, and they have to help you lift up. And then as you slowly lower down, they're going to relax. And each time you lower, you might notice that just that pumping action gets your heels just the tiniest bit closer to the floor. Okay, we've been in down dog for a long time. So let's take a slow motion walk to the front of the yoga mat. Heel to ball of the foot. Heel to ball of the foot. Keep the hands down on the as you can so that the knees are nice and straight. And then soft bend at your knees again at the front of the mat. Switch the elbow that you grab. So opposite hand to opposite elbow. Shake it out again. Shake out your legs. This time the knees are bent enough so that your belly can rest to some extent on your thighs. And I want you to walk your hands over to your left leg. So you're going to turn over to the left leg, hands to the outside of the left leg. Straighten the left leg and just look over your left shoulder. Hands are on the outside of the left leg, on the outer calf. And you're just straightening that knee and looking up. Good. Bend that knee. Come through center. Keep the left knee bent. Straighten the right knee and look up to the ceiling. And lower down. Settle your hands. And let's actually just bring the hands to the knees and rise up to Tadasana. Inhale, arms to the sky, palms together over your heart. Take your feet nice and wide away from one another. Bring the arms by the sides and just let them shake. This one is called empty coat sleeves. You're using the muscles of your legs to swing your arms. So it's not like a punching action or a trooper action. It's like the legs are moving the arms. Really nice. You can take a little bend if you want. Bonus bend. And then come back to center. So we got a little bit of a twist in the upper body. And wiggle your feet a little closer together. Slide your right arm down the right leg, left arm by the ear. Notice your breath. Inhale, center. Slide your left arm down the left leg, right arm by the ear. Inhale, center. And then wiggle your feet together till your toes touch. Sit down into chair pose. I promise you won't be here for too long. You can have your hands on your knees. Take a little bend and straighten in your knees here. This next move is a bit of a balance move. So if you want to do 2 blocks, you can put the blocks like this in front of your feet. And you see if you need them. We're going to have our fingertips to the blocks to help protect our balance if you wish or need. Come onto your tiptoes also here. And you can see how high my heels came off the floor. I'm still in chair pose, but I'm lifting to my tiptoes. And you can keep the ball mound of your foot on the floor. Yeah, exactly like that. So spread your toes. Try to make them take up as much space as is possible. And then if you can balance, work your balance a little. Right. It's just for the fun of it. Lower your hands back to the blocks. Use your blocks at the front of your mat. Now in the middle position. Heels of the hands at the backs of the blocks. Curl the fingers around. And then come back into downward facing dog. You might notice that when your downward facing dog is propped up, your hands are propped up a little bit on your blocks, that your heels will come closer to the floor. You're probably better if your blocks are more sticky, so they're less likely to move. And that shoulder down dog is totally cool too, so you can keep your feet a little closer to your hands. But the other thing that will get your heels close to your hands is shortening it up a little bit. Heels closer to the floor. This time, I want you to use a different principle. So what we've been using is contract, relax. We've been using the activation of the muscle at the back of the leg and then relaxing it to get the heels closer. Now let's do the opposite. Try to lift your toes up off the floor. Feel free to walk your blocks in as I'm doing and try to get your pinky toes also up off the floor. As you lift your toes up off the floor, and you can look up here and see if you want to see an example. That's going to activate this muscle anterior tibialis, and that's going to help to open up the calves at the back of the leg, even if your toes don't lift very high. Just try to lift them a little bit. The effort of lifting will help to open up the calves. This is called reciprocal inhibition. It's super weird, but it works. The other thing that can keep your calves and heels from getting to the floor, of course, would be like the upper back of the legs. So press your thighs back, press the thighs back towards the wall behind you. Your quads, good. And then lower down to your knees and curl all 10 toes under. Again, this time you're gonna actually just sit on your heels. If you need some protection for your knees, your block can go between your feet, either in the low or the tall position, middle or tall position. Or, what I mentioned earlier, is you can take a blanket. This is for if it's uncomfortable for you to sit like this, and have a blanket between your calves and your knees, like that. So the point is not to yank up the pressure on the knees, but to obviously feel a big opening around the toes and the soles of the feet. Yeah, exactly. And if you can wiggle your pinky toes down to the floor and get all of your toes curled under so that your toenails are up towards the ceiling, that is what we're aiming for. So that's a great idea. If your toes are like kind of pointing to the floor rather than resting on the floor in this shape, then you can like lift yourself up until the point where you get the toes resting on the floor. So you can get really creative here. You can use the blocks like under your knees rather than under your butt, but only if you need to keep your toes down. Is that one a better stretch? Yeah.
Is it good if we turn the heel a little to the leg?
Hug your heels towards one another.
Okay.
Hug your heels towards one another.
Oops.
Class is labeled gentle yoga, but I'm turning it up to 11, turning up the volume. All right, so we're gonna take a nice seat after all that torture. Go ahead and stretch your legs out in front of you. And this pose is known as Dandasana. And I just want you to appreciate that it actually takes, for almost everybody, a bit of effort to stay upright here. A bit of effort to bring your belly button forward towards your feet. A bit of effort to curl your toes back towards your eyes. So, hands on the blocks or hands on the floor. You can just punch the floor with your hands and lift up. Or if it's more comfortable for you, put your hands on the blocks. I want you to try to lift your heels off the floor by really straightening your legs. See if you can keep your belly button forward and aim to maintain a natural curve in your low back. Pretty tricky. So relax for a moment and everyone grab your blanket. And you can fold the blanket as many times as you need. So I made a nice buoyant fold. And then I want you to sit on the blanket. Your heels are very unlikely to come up off the floor right now, but if they do, it might be a sign that you have some hypertension at the back of your knees. So if your knees, the back of your knees still touching the floor even though your hips are lifted up, then you might have some hypertension there. So I can slightly, barely get my heels up, but I don't think it's from hypertension. I think it's just from a lot of time practicing downward facing dog. So here, you might hopefully notice that you can get a little more lumbar curve. That's a little easier to send your belly button just the tiniest bit forward, shoulders back, get that action. And I want to point out that when we raise our arms overhead, this is the same action, same shape as downward facing dog. Less weight in the arms, but still a lot of work. The biggest angle of down dog, the most obvious angle, is the one at our hip, right? And so that's where we have to work to stay forward. sweep your hands down behind your thighs and push your thighs into the ground. Like try to lift your knees with your arms, try to bend your knees, but use those thigh muscles to push the thighs back into the floor, the knees back. This is also reciprocal inhibition. I know it's a fancy word, but when you activate not just your anterior tibialis by turning your toes up, but your quads, all four muscles here, pressing your thigh back, that's gonna open the hamstrings. And it's gonna open the muscles that cross the back of the knee. So activating the front of the leg will help to release the back of the leg. Okay, let's just do something sweet for our hamstrings for a moment. Take your blanket and turn it diagonally so that your pelvis is more open to the right. To the, maybe 45 degrees, 30 to 45 degrees to the right. Because you're gonna bring your right heel and place it into the inside of your left thigh. Walk your left hand out to the side and reach your right arm up and over. I'm going to turn so you can see from the back. So left hand out to the side, right arm up and over. From here, I'd like for you to sweep and chop the air. Hand might land on the shin or on the foot. Keep your heart lifted. And then start to fold forward. So you can take that left arm, right arm lands where it lands. You can start to fold forward. Your blocks are also your friend in this shape. So if you know that your hamstrings are not gonna let your pelvis move, then maybe just take the blocks and lift up. Aim for like the cow shape of cat and cow that we did earlier. So belly button towards the toes, and that's gonna keep a nice curve and length in your spine. Wherever you are, inhale and lift up. And let's take it to the other side. So right leg out, diagonal blanket, slightly open to the left, left heel to the inside of the right. Don't forget to move your blanket on that diagonal. Left hips behind the right, right fingertips walk out. You don't have to lean a whole lot in there, but this is just to open up the left side of the body. Take a full breath, and then exhale and chop. Have the hand land wherever it lands, on the leg or maybe on the block. Inhale, lift tall. Exhale, fold forward. And if you're noticing that the pelvis just doesn't move forward, so this is the pelvis moving forward, this is the pelvis not moving. If you notice that your pelvis doesn't move, and you just kind of hinge from your low back, then use your blocks and dig them in. Dig a little hole in the imaginary beach sand. Lift your chest, send your belly button forward. Activate that leg. So you get reciprocal inhibition. So the back of the leg is nice and open. Heart pulls forward. And then release. Okay, so this next move, you're doing okay? It's a good one. This next move is malasana, or it's a deep squat. And I'm gonna offer variations. So the deep yoga squat, I'll show you guys from the side. We're looking for feet to be just a little wider than hip distance. And ideally, heels are gonna get to the ground with the spine pretty neutral, pretty straight, so to speak. But for the vast majority of us, the heels are not going to get to the ground, at least on the first trial. So you can again use your blanket. I would take it right under the heels, just to the lowest possible level. If you prop it up too much, like a nice high heel, like a stiletto, then your heels are never going to relax down onto anything. So you want it to be just a tiny little bit of a stretch, so that you feel something. Your toes, your middle toe and your middle toe and your second toe are in line with the line of your thighs. So you can actually see the line of your thighs, and you get your middle toe or your pinky toe in line with that. Give yourself enough support so you don't have to use the ankle to balance too much. But yeah, and for those of you who are experiencing any knee discomfort, you can sit on a block as well. Let the knees open out, the heels sink down. Yeah. If you find yourself rocking backward like that, then just give yourself maybe something to hold on to in the front. You can also do something like this. So most of you guys are going to be feeling like big hip stretch, maybe also calf and Achilles things going on here. Awesome. Take 2 more breaths in Myofascial. If you have extra time to practice this at home, you can take a layer out of your blanket, for example, and spend a little extra time. This is a great pose that humans do all over the world when there are no chairs around. And it's only from the invention of chairs that we stopped doing this frequently throughout the day. So when you're ready to come out of your Myofascial, then just notice if your heels get any closer to the floor. And walk yourself out to downward facing dog. Apply all the principles. Do a few pumps, lifting, maybe even curling your toes into the floor as you lift to get that contract, relax action. And then exhaling, sinking your heels down as you both lift your toes and press your thighs back. Your blocks are here if you still need a little support of your arms so that your arms are not bearing as much intense weight. And then notice, for those of you who do get your heels down, but your toes are turned out a little, try to make the outer edges of your feet parallel to one another. So outer edges of the feet parallel. It might feel a little bit like you've gone pigeon-toed, but try that out. And shorten your down dog as much as you need. So yeah, you can go ahead and shorten your down dog here. And try your hands on the blocks. Awesome. Go ahead and lower down to the knees. And move your blocks out of the way. Spread your fingers long and just reach back through the right leg. A nice stretch. Strong quad. Push the back of the knee open to the sky inside of table pose. And then lower that down, but keep the toes curled under. And take the left leg back. Press it back. This is a nice one because you're in charge of how much pressure to put through the heel. Straighten up through the quad. Really activate the front thigh up towards the ceiling. And then come back down. And I'm going to show one final trick for getting into the fascial layer. So fascia loves hydration, like to take care of your fascia in a good way. You should hydrate your body throughout the day. If you don't carry your water bottle, here's your PSA. It loves variety of movement, and yoga can be really good for that variety of movement. But let's say, for example, that your tendency is to walk with your toes turned out a little bit. Very common. There could be lots of very good reasons why that might be the case. But if your toes turn out a bit, you're going to shorten a bit on the inside of your thighs, right, on the inside of your calves. And if that's the case, then when you get into downward facing dog, your heels are going to turn in, your toes are going to turn out. You're never going to like uncover the reason why you're tight there, right? So it's a good practice to play with heels separating from one another a little, going a little bit opposite of where your tendencies are in general, in yoga and also in life to some extent. But the fascia also really loves, so it loves movement, but it doesn't so much like repetition of the same exact movement. And sometimes our yoga practice, unfortunately, reinforces what our tendencies are. But we use it as a mindfulness practice, right? So we'll get out of that. But it also loves deep pressure, slow, sustained pressure. And you can use the corner of a block to get some slow, sustained pressure on the inner calf, where many of us really need it, as well as on the hamstrings. So I'm going to show you guys this trick. If you show up to your yoga classes like 5 minutes early and you grab a block and you just rock the corner of that block into your calf, things will open up in the backs of your legs in a new way. So we're going to do the calf of the right leg, or whichever leg you have picked. And you can not just rock like tiny oscillations, sustaining the pressure in a single place, but you can also hold it and point and flex your foot. And at home you could do something like this, perhaps with a block, a foam roller, a pie roller, a tennis ball. You could use anything you have. You could use maybe even a water bottle, speaking of water bottles. And then pick another place, either a little bit further down, maybe an inch or two further down, or further up the calf. And go ahead and just find that oscillating movement. It might be the beauty queen wave, side to side. It might be pointing and flexing your foot. It might be bending and straightening your knee. You're feeling a lot here. It's because your quad's working pretty hard. You know, and if you are feeling a lot in your upper thigh, just sit on something so that that part is a little more open. All right, I'm gonna get one more spot in the upper calf, turning a little out and in, out and in. The only wrong way to do this is if you bruise yourself. So just be mindful of the intensity of the pressure and your tendency to bruise. Otherwise, you're in good shape. Let's take the corner of the block up the hamstring. And again, you can do the beauty queen wave, left and right with your foot, like I'm showing. You could bend and straighten your knee, so long as you have a nice corner of the block in there. Or edge of the block. You get to your outer hamstrings by turning your knee to point out and your toe to point out, or you can get to your inner hamstrings, a little bit of your inner thigh by pointing your toe in. And if you find a place that feels, I have this code word, the code word is therapeutic, then hang out there a little bit, breathe into it. Use that mindfulness practice to notice the discomfort and notice how it is distinct from other types of pain. I don't want anybody to be in pain. We're going through this a little quickly just for time constraints. So set the block to the side and stand up fully. Now I'd like for you to take the middle of the arch of your foot, right on the same leg that you've been doing, right on the corner of the block. Let your toes just relax. Feel the stretch along the back of the leg. Feel the intensity of the pressure in the middle of the arch. You can pick another spot, maybe an inch or a centimeter back, or a little bit forward. Breathe into it. let's just notice if this little bit of attention, mostly this myofascial release, has changed anything for downward facing dog. Again, you have the option to use your blocks under your hands, heels of the hands at the back of the block, blocks firmly on the surface. Notice if the side you just released feels any different than the other side.
Yes.
Big difference? See
Yes.
what it feels like if you turn your toes in or out. Okay, we'll do the other side. So go ahead and sit on the block again if you need it. And let's start with the hamstrings on the side. So you're going to bring the corner of your spare block up as high as you can up the thigh. And really rock. Again, we're doing beauty queen waves, left and right. And you want to spend a couple of breaths at each spot. You can also do the bending and straightening of the knee. And then move the block down just a little bit. And work on the same actions. Letting your breath take you into a relaxed, restored state. Beauty queen waves, internal and external rotation of the hip. Keep moving down. So I'm moving pretty quickly, but of course at home you can press pause and spend a little extra time. I think like in the ideal world, we'd really dedicate quite a bit of time, a few times a week, to this activity of myofascial release, especially to the legs. And you can work into the calf. Turning your toes in and out. And working your way a little further down. Pointing and flexing the toes, internally and externally rotating at the hip for that beauty queen wave. And then I'm going to get one more spot. I'm going to go up high and towards the middle of the calf, the medial portion of the calf. So again, rock into it with your block. You can also do this, of course, with the edge of a book, or a tennis ball, or a lacrosse ball, or even a water bottle. The most popular way to do myofascial release is probably with foam rollers, which I also love. And then let's stand up. So please stand up and place the arch of your left foot, middle of the arch if feasible, on the corner of the block, on the edge of the block. Drape as much of your body weight over this block as you can, maybe even coming onto the tiptoes of your right leg. Pick a spot just a centimeter back or a centimeter forward. Lean into it. Do some deep breathing. This is also great with a golf ball. You're trying to find those therapeutic spots in the middle of the arch. You don't want to go over the heel pad, and you don't want to go over the ball mount of the foot. So pick one more spot. And if you started off with your heels far from the ground, and when you were sitting in Dandasana staff pose with your legs stretched out in front of you, you noticed a difficulty getting the pelvis to move forward, then you want to keep your blocks under your hands. And if not, if you didn't have any difficulty moving the pelvis forward, i.e. your hamstrings had enough mobility, you can take the blocks out of the way. Put your hands on the floor, curl your fingers into the floor. Let's apply all of the principles. So we've done self-myofascial release. We have done muscle stretching and sustained stretching to the fascia. We are active in our downward facing dog and working both contract, relax, both with the knees bent to get soleus, And with the legs straight to get gastroc, these two muscles that feed into the Achilles tendon. And then finally, we're going to sustain ourselves within the shape of downward facing dog, lifting the toes as much as you can, even if it's just energetically. Pressing the shins back, pressing the thighs back, pressing the arms down, lifting the sitting bones to the sky. This action, when you activate your anterior tibialis muscle at the front of the shins, the four quads at the front of the thigh, that's going to take you so far into releasing the posterior chain, the muscles at the back of the body that go all the way into the feet. You can windshield wipe your hips a little side to side. And then slowly lower your knees down to the earth. Take a moment to rest in child's pose. If you'd like, you can take a seated meditation or shavasana right now, and if you'd like, you can keep practicing. I hope this has been really helpful for you in getting your heels closer to the floor inside a downward facing dog. I'm Dr. Ariele Foster, physical therapist and yoga teacher, and founder of Yoga Anatomy Academy. I'd be so grateful if you followed me on Facebook, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and like this post. Thank you so much.